President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet picks, including Matt Gaetz for Attorney General and Pete Hegseth as the head of the Department of Defense, will require approval from the Republican-controlled Senate next year. Here's a look at how Trump is choosing candidates and how the approval process could play out. During Trump's first term, he picked lots of Washington insiders for top jobs, like Senator Jeff Sessions for Attorney General and retired General Jim Mattis for the Department of Defense, though he didn't have strong relationships with them. Reuters national political correspondent Jim Oliphant says Trump's taking a different approach now.
What we've seen with Trump's picks this time around is a really consistent pattern, and that's been he's going with people that he knows well. What Trump is trying to do here basically is build a circle of trust where he can count on his people in these various roles across the administration to execute his policies the way that he wants it done.
The nominees will likely meet with key senators ahead of confirmation hearings to start around the time Trump takes office in January, when the American public can get to know them and their backgrounds and assess their suitability for the roles.
All he needs from the Senate is a simple majority, 51 votes. And so they have a few votes over that, which even allows a senator to perhaps to not go along with a particular nominee. The problem is where you have more controversial nominees, and I'm thinking about now Matt Gaetz to run the Justice Department, perhaps Pete Hegseth, who's been chosen to run the Defense Department, is, there are a lot of questions right now about their qualifications and their suitability for these jobs. So if you were to get a block of Republican senators, let's say 5, they could tank a nomination.
Trump could get a sense of potential opposition ahead of a hearing and decide to withdraw the nomination as well. He could avoid a confirmation fight altogether by making what's called a recess appointment.
Trump has been talking about doing something called recess appointments, which is it's a mechanism that the Constitution allows where you can instill a cabinet member, an agency head, without Senate approval, if the Senate is in recess, if basically between sessions. The appointment lasts for 2 years, and it is a way, it has been done in the past as a way to sort of bypass the confirmation process.
The problem is nominees could be viewed as illegitimate, and it could antagonize the Senate. Republicans won majority control of the chamber as well as the House, and Trump may not want to create divisions before beginning to implement his policy agenda.
A rights group on Thursday said Israel has caused a forced displacement of civilians in Gaza to such an extent that it constitutes war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Israel claims that it set up an evacuation system to allow Palestinians, civilians in Gaza to seek safety.
Human Rights Watch said its investigation showed that Israel failed to show its efforts to relocate Palestinian civilians met the required conditions under international law. Adam Kugel is the deputy director of the group's Middle East and North Africa division.
Our report and documentation shows that Israel has failed to meet the burden. Therefore, they are committing forced displacement, and because it's pursuant to a state policy, it is a crime against humanity.
Israel, in response, accused the organization of using rhetoric that is, quote, completely false and detached from reality. Israel invaded the Gaza Strip last year after Hamas gunmen led an assault on communities in southern Israel, killing around 1,200 people, according to Israeli authorities, and abducting more than 250 as hostages. Since then, the Israeli campaign has killed more than 43,500 people, according to Gaza health authorities. The onslaught destroyed much of the enclave's infrastructure, forcing most of the population's 2.3 million people to move several times. For the past month, Israeli troops have moved tens of thousands of people from areas of Gaza's north, as they have sought to destroy Hamas forces the military says are regrouping. Human Rights Watch said the displacement of Palestinians, quote, is likely planned to be permanent in the buffer zones and security corridors, an action it said would amount to, quote, ethnic cleansing. The Israeli military has denied seeking to create permanent buffer zones. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar said on Monday that Palestinians displaced from their homes in northern Gaza would be allowed to return at the end of the war.
The Taj Mahal was obscured as a toxic mix of smoke and fog shrouded the Indian capital. Smog caused a sharp drop in visibility in Delhi this week, causing a raft of delays at the city's airport. More patients flocked to hospitals, particularly children. One paediatrician told a news agency he'd seen a spike in asthma attacks. Officials blamed high pollution, combined with humidity, low wind speed, and a slight drop in temperature. Daily air quality in the region crossed into the severe category for the first time this season. Air quality monitoring group IQ Air ranked New Delhi the second most polluted major city on Thursday, behind Lahore in neighbouring Pakistan. Dense smog has engulfed other parts of northern India, such as the states of Punjab and Uttar Pradesh, where visibility fell to zero in some areas on Thursday. Pakistan's Punjab province, which shares a border with India, also faces similar conditions. Doctors in Lahore said many children were coming to hospital from across the region with ailments caused by smog. Delhi's pollution is expected to improve from severe to very poor this weekend. Greater wind speeds are forecast on Friday. Authorities expect both factors to disperse the smog in the city and improve visibility.
Among the Sudanese war's many victims was Khalid Sanhouri. When he died of illness, he was buried here in front of his house in Omdurman, Sudan's second largest city. It was too dangerous to reach the graveyard. According to a report by researchers in Britain and Sudan, more than 61,000 people are estimated to have died in Khartoum state during the first 14 months of Sudan's devastating war, with deaths from starvation, disease and the collapse of health services putting the toll at significantly higher than previously recorded. Sanhouri's neighbour, Mohammed Omar, said intensive fighting prevented them from getting medicine or help for him when he fell ill.
It is difficult for someone to be buried by the front door. His daughter still cannot come and see this scene. It is difficult. It is God's command, and we cannot say anything. But it is very painful.
War between the Army and Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, erupted in April 2023. Some bodies buried near homes are now being relocated to Omdurman's main cemetery. Undertaker Abdin Khidir says there are 50 burials a day. Graves have spread into an adjoining soccer field, and the bodies keep coming. The preprint study by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine's Sudan Research Group, released on Wednesday before peer review, found some 26,000 people suffered violent deaths in Khartoum state, which is more than the United Nations statistic for the whole country. Ahmed Mohammed helped dig these graves by a local soccer pitch. He recalls how RSF fighters stayed in his neighbourhood for 3 months and the locals were trapped.
Most of those people died because of disease and starvation. They could not find food, drink or medicine. The RSF fighters deprived us of everything. It was normal for them to deprive you of food and drink, or prevent you from leaving your home to get medical care.
Tallying the dead has been a challenge. Fighting cut people off from contact with the outside world and from hospitals, morgues and cemeteries where they could record deaths. Researchers used a sampling technique known as capture-recapture. They compiled 3 lists of the dead from different sources: social media surveys, community surveys and deaths announced on social media. They found very little overlap between the lists, suggesting many deaths went undetected. In Khartoum Bahri, a city north of the capital, hospital manager Hadil Malik recalls a single week when 144 people died.
As we all know, malnutrition leads to weak immunity in general. This is one factor which leads to exacerbating epidemics, which leads to many deaths, especially among pregnant women and children, in addition to an increase of anemia levels. For us, one of the major side effects is severe anemia and fatigue, which leads to more side effects, including heart failure and all other complications.
The warring sides have traded blame for the growing toll. The Health Ministry told Reuters that it has observed far fewer war-related deaths, with its tally standing at 5,565. The RSF did not dispute the study's estimates, but blamed the deaths in the capital on what it described as deliberate airstrikes on populated areas. The United Nations says the conflict has driven 11 million people from their homes and unleashed the world's biggest hunger crisis.
At Chad's National Meteorological Agency, the high-growth thermograph, which gauges humidity, is broken. It's amongst other pieces of dust-blown equipment meant to help the agency track weather patterns. Much of Africa is in a similar situation, lacking reliable forecasts that are a keystone of disaster management, as climate change makes extreme weather more frequent.
You have every right to be angry.
At COP29 climate talks on Wednesday, UN Chief Antonio Guterres called for urgent action to overcome gaps in data and funding. But the 2027 aim for universal protection by early warning systems appears particularly ambitious for Chad. The agency's Deputy Director Hamid Abakar Suleiman said around 80% of the devices at this site didn't work.
To bridge the gap, that is, to balance the country in terms of stations, we need about 400 stations. Currently, we have 64 automatic stations, so we are well below demand. So we need more stations, that's all I can tell you. And we need funding.
Chad has battled another season of devastating floods, with people like Josiana Lasra being displaced.
We are hungry and don't know where to shelter our children. There is no more shelter. All spaces are flooded. We have lost our sorrel, bean, and cereal crops. Everything is destroyed now because no one warned us about such a disaster. We are truly suffering.
The World Meteorological Organization said Africa, a continent of 1.5 billion people, has the world's least developed weather observation network. And being unprepared has deadly consequences. It was reported that floods across Africa kill 4 times more people on average than in Europe and North America, due to a lack of warning.